Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
I wish I was in Dixie. Away, away, way down south in Dixie. Bring the niggas with the banjos. Send in the clowns.
Oh, I wish I was in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland where I was born, early on one frosty morning, look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Then I wish I was in Dixie. Hooray, hooray. In Dixieland I'll take my stand to live and die.
According to police, Dedman, with 2 teenage girls as his passengers, drove to a local McDonald's, meeting up with the rest of the group. There, according to witnesses interviewed by police, he said, "I ran that nigger over."
He was not remorseful. He was laughing about the killing.
Context of white supremacy. Justice Gus T Renegade in for another program, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy, racism. Today's date is Monday, September 26, 2011. Obviously, I have sounded better, hanging in and just on the grind. White people do not take breaks. We don't take breaks either. Very much looking forward to the program. In fact, I was just telling our guests that even under the weather, reading constructive information did my spirit well. So stay on the grind. We have many problems that black people need to take care of. Just try and be constructive as we can with our time and energy. Our guest for today's program, he was with us last year, and I was telling him that it's been well over a year since he last spoke with us, and people still reference the program and say he was easily one of their favorite guests, and they were really looking forward to having him back on the program. It's always great to hear from people who have immense knowledge, and they use that to try to help black people. Unfortunately, that's kind of rare, but when you can find it, man, outstanding. You can visit the website. Lots of fantastic information. The website for our guest today, sankoreinstitute.org. It's in the description for the program, but I'll spell it out. SANKORE Institute.org. Sankore Institute.org. Our guest, he has a long career as a science education researcher and teacher. He is the founder of the Sankore Institute. As I said, he uses a ton of his time and energy and knowledge to assist Black people directly improve Black children's ability to thrive in the classroom, especially in sciences. Author as well. He's written many reports. We're going to talk about some of his more recent published reports today. In addition to that, he's also author of the book, The Greatest Gifts a Parent Can Give. Black person writing a book on parenting, A+. Real pleasure to have him on the program. We have been very much, even myself, we've been very much looking forward to having him back on the program. We're glad we're finally able to make it work out. Joining us live, our guest, Dr. Jomo Mutegi. Dr. Mutegi, are you with us?
Yes, Brother Gus. I'm glad to be with you.
Outstanding. We are, as I said, super pleased to hear from you again. I'm anxious to hop right into the material, but before doing so, I just wanted to give you an opportunity for folks who might not have heard you the first time around on the program. This might be their first time hearing from you. If you'd like to give them some background information just so they'd be a little more clear about who we're speaking with today.
Sure. Well, what I like to say is I'm a mild-mannered professor by day and a revolutionary African by night. My day job is an associate professor of science education at Indiana University in Indianapolis. And my specific area of work is science education. So research on how children, Black children in particular, learn science. But with that, I'm committed to the uplift and liberation of African people around the planet.
It comes through in the work. If you visit the website, sankoreinstitute.org, you'll see exactly what he's talking about. We will, and in fact, if you listen to this program, I suspect it'll come through clearly. Dr. Mutegi, he authored 2 reports. Recently, he's authored many, well over 20, but 2 that we're going to focus on today. They're more recent. The first of which is titled The Inadequacies of Science for All and the Necessity and Nature of a Socially Transformative Curriculum Approach for African American Science Education. You can download this report. It's on the website, sankoreinstitute.org. I'm actually going to post links on my page on Facebook as well as the COWS Facebook group so people can download a PDF of this report. I think it's fantastic. If you have children, even I think if you're just a Black person, period, you will appreciate checking this material out. But definitely, if you have children, you will want to see this report. It is phenomenal. I will give a quick quote and then get Dr. Mutegi, if you can kind of set us up with what this report is all about. You begin with a quote from Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his seminal work, The Miseducation of the Negro. And this quick paragraph, Dr. Woodson writes, highly educated Negroes denounce persons who advocate for the Negro, a sort of education different in some respects from that now given the white man. Negroes who have been so long inconvenienced and denied opportunities for development are naturally afraid of anything that sounds like discrimination. They are anxious to have everything the white man has, even if it is harmful. Dr. Carter G. Woodson sounds like it could have been written yesterday. Dr. Dr. Mutegi, can you kind of set us up with what this report is all about?
Sure, and I'll begin by giving the listeners some historical context. In my field, in science education, science educators, people like myself, work in concert with teachers and with scientists to determine what's important for students to know in science. And a number of years ago was the most recent push. We're actually in the midst of another push now to redefine that. And this current push is just a slight tweaking of what was established, in the early 90s. And so I guess we're looking at about 20 years ago. The National Science Education Standards at that time was written to determine what students should know when they studied science at all levels. We usually think of K-12, but it has also pervaded university work, and there are times when you have science in informal settings and even with students before they begin schooling. All of this has been influenced by these standards. And the mantra that has given that movement impetus has been science for all. The idea being that we want all students to learn science, just like George Bush's No Child Left Behind. It's very hard to argue against science for all or No Child Left Behind. You argue against it, and the implicit thought of the person you're arguing to is, well, you don't want science for all, you want some people to be without science? And that's not the case. What I'm arguing in this paper and what I've been arguing is that the science they prescribe for all students is not good for black children. I'll give you this analogy, guys, because it makes it very transparent. You told me earlier today that you're suffering from a cold. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let's suppose I'm having some illness symptoms. Let's say my eyesight is blurry. Let's say I got the gout. Okay. Now, we go into a hospital, and the doctor says, I have medicine for all. Does that work for you?
I might have some concerns about that.
I have some concerns about it, too. What this notion of science for all assumes is that all students need the same thing. And history shows us that we need something very different than what Europeans need.
I could not agree more. One of the big things that stands out in this report that you touch on early, context, I felt like, man, anytime there's a guest coming on the program and they spend a significant amount of time talking about the importance of context, I know we are in for a constructive broadcast. You, in this report, start with the premise that we are not on equal footing, that racism, white supremacy is a major problem, and it's something that needs to be factored into the education that black students receive. And this is a paragraph from that work. And you're talking about the disparities between African American children and their white counterparts. You write, the disparity statistics presented above are very useful in helping us to understand the social condition of African Americans. I will focus my presentation on three features of that social condition. First, the social condition of African Americans is pervasively deficient. By deficient, I mean that African Americans have more of those things that are bad and less of those things that are good. By pervasive, I mean that this deficiency exists across nearly every area of human activity, i.e., economics, education, entertainment, health, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. So by characterizing the social condition of African Americans as pervasively deficient, I am saying that on nearly every relevant social statistic, African Americans have more of those things that are bad and less of those things that are good. And I wanted you make it very clear this is not just true for black people in the area of the world known as the United States. This is unfortunately true for black people worldwide. Is that correct, Dr. Mutegi?
That's correct.
And this is something that needs to, or I guess I'll ask this way. Why is it important that this be truthfully acknowledged for black students, that we don't go in giving them the premise that, hey, everything is cool, we're all on the same foot now? Why is it important that black students understand the pervasive deficiencies that black people worldwide experience?
Well, let me answer it this way. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. First, I'll start with the basic premise, which will address the question. The reform documents have us operating under some false assumptions. The first false assumption is that we live in a society where there's parity, meaning that everything is equal. Now, that seems on its face a laughable assumption, but if you read the document, it's stated explicitly. It says these standards work, and they work assuming that all students have equal education. Well, the first problem with that is if I write a document designed to teach children with the assumption that all children are equal, and also the knowledge that all children are not equal, I'm writing a document to the detriment of a large portion of those students. Just like if I prescribe a medicine with the assumption that all diseases are equal, with full knowledge that all of them are not equal, I might as well be giving many of my patients a death sentence. So that's number one. Another assumption is that, on which it operates, is that race is insignificant. And there's been a number of studies which have shown a glaring omission of any effort to address racial disparity, either in the curriculum, by which we mean what is taught, or the instruction, by which we mean how it's taught. Now, with those two problematic assumptions as a backdrop, I'm going to give you a very concrete example. In Liberia, one of the primary crops is rubber. Now, I have this exercise I do with many of my classes. I like to do it with graduate classes, doctoral classes, because at that level, we feel like we're pretty smart. We feel like we know a lot. We've had a lot of schooling. And I just ask a very simple question. And where rubber is concerned, I'll tailor it to rubber. How many here, and I'll raise my hand, how many here know where rubber comes from? And I'll get about half the people would raise their hand. So how many, who can tell me, of those who know where rubber's from, who can tell me where rubber's from? And somebody will say, okay, rubber comes from trees. Now, mind you, easily half of my doctoral students will not know that rubber comes from trees. Now, beyond that, I'll ask, okay, what is rubber used in? Now, we know the answer to that. We use rubber in household appliances. We use it in our automobiles for tires, for belts. Okay, we use it in our athletic equipment. Great. We know it comes from trees now. We know what we use it in. Who in this room, raise your hand, who in this room can go from rubber tree to basketball, or from rubber tree to automobile tire? Not a hand goes up. How is it that you've sat through 12 years of schooling? You've sat through 4 years of schooling beyond that, and for doctoral students, they've sat through a few years beyond that. They're experts in the teaching and learning of mathematics and science, and nobody knows how to go from rubber tree to rubber. The reason that that's a problem is because their education was not tailored for them. The knowledge of how to take materials out of the earth and use it to practical purpose was taken from us, historically. It's not so much an issue for Europeans, because they'll get their credential, they'll get their degree, they'll go work with Firestone or Goodyear, and they'll learn with Firestone and with Goodyear how to go from rubber tree to rubber. And they'll make money for Firestone and for Goodyear. Now I'm going to go back to where this is important to us on a large scale. That's on a micro scale. Now, on a macro scale, Liberia is the largest producer of rubber. Do you know that the Liberians who tap these trees, who carry this rubber, and many of them don't receive anything close to fair compensation for their works. They barely have a subsistence living. In fact, Liberian advocates call it they call these rubber plantations, and they're slaves for all intents and purposes. When rubber is taken away from Liberia and processed and brought back to Liberia to be sold, Liberians cannot afford to buy their own rubber. Are you with me, Gus?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
I'm going to take it a step further. That same story can be told about bauxite and aluminum in Ghana. So that Ghanaians harvest bauxite, which Europeans will take it many times to the islands to be processed, bring it back to Ghana to sell, and Ghanaians cannot afford to buy their own aluminum. The same can be said for tea in Kenya, where Kenyans will harvest tea, it's taken away to be processed, brought back to Kenya, and Kenyans cannot afford to buy their own tea. The same can be said for diamonds in Sierra Leone and Angola and South Africa. All throughout Africa, like Dr. Clark said, people will come in, they want something that they don't want to pay for, and they take it from us. And one means of ensuring their ability to do this is keeping us ignorant. So if in 12 plus years of schooling, our brightest, those who go through the most schooling, don't even know how to go from plant to product, what are they doing with our time in schools? They are wasting our children's time in schools.
Wow. Outstanding example. Again, our guest, Dr. Jomo Mutegi. Wow, I was actually thinking Congo when you mentioned rubber as well, but the heart of darkness and what happened in that area of the world is also intricately tied to rubber. White people from Belgium.
Right.
Wow. You, in this report, and I mean, this ties directly to what you touch on in the report, when you have an educational system set up in a system where black people worldwide have massive deficiencies in all areas of activity, and then you have an educational program where that is ignored, concealed, or you just say something that's totally opposite. That's not true. Everybody's on the same footing. We're all good. There is no racism. You've already got, at least for black students, you've already got us on a bad path. Then you talk about what the actual purpose of education should be. Great paragraph. I'm going to take it right from your words. The preceding overview of the social condition of African Americans and African people throughout the world provides direction as to the social needs of African Americans that a socially transformative curriculum approach should work to meet. First and foremost, African American education in general and science education in particular should position African Americans to A, realize their colonized status, B, understand how it is maintained, and C, work to wrest power from their colonizers. It is my contention that the prevailing curricular approach in science education is inadequate for helping African American students to meet these social needs. In the next section, I will juxtapose science education as articulated in current reform against a socially transformative approach. This juxtaposition focuses specifically on the perspectives, goals, and assumptions inherent in each approach. The purpose of this comparison is to illustrate how science education reform, as currently articulated, is inadequate for African American students. I guess to begin with, if I think it would be helpful for our listeners, can you explain what you mean when you use the term socially transformative curricular?
Sure. Well, curriculum theorists have a number of different models for what curriculum should look like. And they call those, and different theorists will give them different terms, but the main idea is that there are many uses of curriculum. Now, in order to explain socially transformative curriculum, I'm going to explain a cultural transmission. That's what most of us learn under. So anybody who spent any time in school, you've heard plenty of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Boy, by the time I was through college, it seemed like every class had to start off with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. You go on psychology, oh, Plato was the first psychologist. You go into chemistry, oh, Plato was the first chemist. I thought, good grief, was it nothing this man has not done? Okay, that is cultural transmission. And the idea is that they want to transmit the best products of their intellectual culture, so that we want to tell our children, who are the smartest people? What did they do? And that's what they do with that approach, cultural transmission. That's what the schooling that most of us have had, so that we sit in science classes and we learn about photosynthesis. Why do we learn about photosynthesis? I ask all the time, can we live rich and productive lives and never know the formula for photosynthesis? It's really not an important bit of knowledge to know. Acid-base reactions, do we really need to know that? We don't need to know any of that. By contrast, a socially transformative approach is aimed at helping the learner to change the society in which they live. Now, for people who have another people's boot on their neck, we need to change the society in which we live. We don't need to know which of the boot person's people were great. So this is not it's not novel in that the approach I'm suggesting is not new. What is novel is that it's not been applied to people of African descent. It's not been applied in the field of science, to my knowledge.
Wow. Well, I can completely sign on that, and yeah, to be in an educational system where you really, I think it would be accurate to say you sit in the classroom and you pretty much just worship and praise white people and learn that white people have done everything. They wrote all the books. They came up with all the theories. Anything of educational value, white people did it. You never see, most of us don't even have teachers that look like us. But certainly you're not seeing people who wrote the textbook or the people's theories that you got to learn and names and faces and all that. You're not seeing black people. Man, coupled with everything else. I mean, Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro. And you have, this is a quote from Paulo Freire, excellent material, and he's talking about similar interests, quote that you have him in your essay here. The interests of the oppressors lie in changing the consciousness of the oppressed, not the situation which oppresses them. For the more the oppressed can be led to adjust to that situation, the more easily they can be dominated. Tranquility rests on how well men fit the world the oppressors have created and how little they question it. Fantastic quote. In fact, I want to read that one more time. The interests of the oppressors lie in changing the consciousness of the oppressed, not the situation which oppresses them. For the more the oppressed can be led to adjust to that situation, the more easily they can be dominated. Tranquility rests on how well men fit the world the oppressors have created and how little they question it. Phenomenal quote to include in the paper. Just having an educational setting that is not what you call socially transformative curricular, I guess we should not be surprised then that we still have this problem and that we have a lot of black people who don't really see any interest in working to change this. We just want to get along, don't rock the boat too much. That is exactly what the type of educational system that we have now is supposed to produce. Is that correct, Dr. Mutegi?
Absolutely. And in fact, and that goes well beyond science. I was talking with one of my doctoral students last week on a paper she's working on, and this idea of education as a means of advancing yourself socially was often advocated when they were founding the public school system. At that time, it was called the common schools. But if you read the essays that those common school founders wrote to each other and read notes from their minutes, their interest was not in whether or not education could be used to help people advance themselves. Their interest was in how could education best be used to control people. So schools have then and are now tools of social control. And one of their major aims is to keep people content with their lot in life. And there's none in this paper, but I've pulled quotes which are given as defenses of slavery, in which that stated very explicitly. Blacks cannot rise to higher functions of life, and to provide him an education of such is a manifest absurdity. And that's a quote from a guy by the name of C.O.W.S. That's a pen name he wrote under. So you're 100% correct.
Context of white supremacy. Again, our guest, second time visiting the program, Dr. Jomo Mutegi. As I said, anytime I see context pop up in reports, get very excited. I want to get to that next, but I believe Justice is also with us, and I think she has some questions as well. Justice, if you have some questions for Dr. Mutegi, your line should be open. Please feel free.
Should I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. I believe. Okay. I have a little cold, so I'm gonna try my best. My first question is, greetings to Dr. Mutegi. What is the Senkore? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Okay. Yeah. What is the Senkore Institute about, and why was it made?
Yeah, I appreciate your question, Justice. The Sankore Institute is a nonprofit organization, and I actually started it with a friend of mine. He and I went to school together. He has a background. He's an engineer by his training and by credential. Now he works more in as a manager, an upper level executive with a corporation. But at the time we started it, we were both in a similar situation. We had gone through years of school, and at some point in college, you become the only one in your class if you're in the sciences, the only black in your classes. And then we begin the world of work, and you're sitting in meetings all day. In my case, you write papers. I'm surprised Gus read it because so few other people read them. They're so esoteric, and they're in places that people don't have access to. And we won't have a greater impact on our community. And so we thought, let's work at starting a nonprofit. And at the time, just to be honest, neither of us knew anything about starting nonprofits. We didn't know what the nonprofit really should do. We had an idea of what we wanted to happen as an end result. But we got into it from a position of ignorance, and we've just learned as we've gone along. And quite honestly, I'm still learning quite. But the mission of Sankore Institute is to increase the infrastructure of African communities around the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And what I mean by increasing the infrastructure, infrastructure we often think of as physical buildings, and vehicles, tangible stuff, into one very much infrastructure. However, infrastructure is also people, it's also ideas, it's also cultural norms. And so in our community now, if you're a tall black man and you put on a suit and you walk onto a campus or you walk into a public place, people will assume that you're an athlete. If you look clean enough, look like you have some measure of success, you'll assume you're an athlete. If you walk into a club, they'll assume you can dance. Now, if an Asian puts on a suit and walks into a university or to a public space, they might think he's a scientist. They will assume that the Asian can do kung fu, that he probably can't dance. And what we want to do is impact our community culturally such that science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are understood in black communities as the thing that black people do. So we don't want to be seen as only good athletes. I mean, we're going to be that. God gave us that. God also gave us a genius, and we are the most phenomenal scientists the planet has known. It's just that we are right now suffering, we're reeling from the historical ma'afa that whites have put us through, and we don't see our natural, our innate abilities in fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
What does the name Sankore mean to you?
Well, we took the name Sankore. It's taken actually from one of the temples at the University of Timbuktu. So that during the Middle Ages, during Europe's Middle Ages, the Moors were the mainstay of learning. And there were in the world, there were two centers of learning. So that anywhere you were on the planet, we'll say European, African, this portion of the planet, we don't know what the Native Americans were doing at the time, but anywhere you were in that region, if you wanted to advance yourself educationally, you came to either Africa, where we had the University of Timbuktu, or you went to Spain, where the Moors had set up a similar university. And Sankore was one of those learning centers. So we chose the name Sankore in honor of that period of intellectual advancement that we've had as an African people.
Why is the Sankore Vanguard looking for strong young black men?
Justice, how old are you?
12.
12. Now I'm going to get in your business a little bit if you don't mind. I imagine that at 12, you're envisioning yourself one day having a family. Am I wrong in that?
Maybe.
Well, you at least want the option, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. You don't want to look up one day and say, you know what, I want a husband, but there's no good men out here. You don't want that situation. You want to be able to say, I could get married if I want to, and here's my choice. I don't have to if I don't want to, right? Is that right?
Uh-huh. But I know. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Go ahead.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So if that's what you want, then that's what I want for you. And in fact, I would say that's what I want for our community. So right now, one of the tragedies that we have in our community is that our family structure is eroding, and it's eroding rapidly. Many times people say that slavery is what began the erosion of our family structures. But if we look at history and we look at the involvement of husbands, wives, and children, we did not have the kind of erosion even right after slavery. In fact, when slaves were free, one of the first things they did was travel the country to try to find their children and their spouses to reunite those families. It's only been within the past, I'd say, 30, 40 years where we've begun to see widespread erosion of our family structure. So that now 70% of children that are born in single-parent homes, meaning that either the mother's not there or the father's not there. And I think it's 50% of black women will never be married. Now, I don't want to give the impression that that's all because of black men. It's not. Matter of fact, if you remove the European from history, we don't have the problems with our family structure that we have now. So, to my way of understanding history, Europeans are ultimately culpable for our condition. But Al Sharpton has a quote that I like, and he says, if you knock me down, shame on you. But if I stay down, shame on me. And so I'm dealing with the second part of that equation, which is the shame on me. It is our responsibility, in spite of what Europeans have done to us, it's our responsibility to repair our community, beginning with our homes. So I work with young men on that, primarily because I know what the challenges are that young men face. I know what the needs are that young men have. And the Sankaré Vanguard is a vehicle by which we can use our interest in learning more about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and couple that with the social needs that we have in our community, and also the interpersonal needs that our young men have, and I can use that to prepare them not just for advanced work in science, but for their role and responsibility in our communities. I can prepare them for manhood. And so we say we're looking for some strong men because what we put them through, it takes a degree of strength and commitment to endure it.
Did white people help with the Sankaré Institute or website?
You mean the building of the website?
Just the website, like a period.
With any aspect of the website. Okay. Yeah. Well, yes and no. The host of the website is I'm assuming it's a white company. So we pay them to do the hosting. We pay them for the domain registration, that sort of thing. But the design of the website has always been by people of African descent. Certainly the content has always been by people of African descent. I'm committed to the idea that we alone can solve our problems. So while on one hand we live in a world run by whites to a large degree, we work with them to some degree, but as much as possible where we can have control over our work, I believe that we should control our own work.
Do you think those white people are racist?
Do I think that most are racist?
No, the white people that help with your institute.
We don't really have whites who help with the institute, not in any fundamental or direct way. But let me answer your question in this way. I don't really think of the question in that way, and that's something that I think that has become a distraction for us. So we'll sometimes ask. I don't know if you're too young to remember this, but a few years back there was a radio host, Don Imus, who made a comment about a college basketball team, and these are mostly black women. He called them nappy-headed hoes. And so the discussion in the media was, well, is Don Imus racist? Well, that's the wrong question. I mean, yeah, Don Imus is racist, if you want to look at it that way, okay? What I say is we live in a system of racism and white supremacy. The air we breathe is racist. So to ask is any individual person racist misses the point. What's of interest to me is the degree to which we contribute to the system or we are working to destroy the system. And so you will have people who do good work towards the destruction of the system, but in some aspects of their lives, but in other aspects they may prop up the system. And that's part of the trick bag that we're in. Another way I'll answer the question is that for those who are still determined to try to sort out the whites that are racist and the ones that are not, I spent a lot of my life interacting with Europeans. The school I went to growing up in elementary, middle, and high school was predominantly white. The universities I've attended, predominantly white. I worked at Morgan State University for about 5 years, but aside from that, all the universities that I've worked in have been predominantly white. So I have a good sense of, I've met and encountered a lot of Europeans. And if I had a bag of rattlesnakes and inside the bag there was one garden snake, I would not have my hand in the bag trying to find a garden snake. So whether there are some who are not, who don't intend us ill or not, I don't know. But I'm not sticking my hand in the bag to try to figure that out.
How can non-white people see that the C.O.W.S. Institute is constructive in working against the system, the system of racism, white supremacy?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to say that once more. I missed the first part. How can who see?
How can non-white people see
okay,
that
how can non-white people see?
the
Say the whole thing.
Okay. How can non-white people see that the C.O.W.S. Institute is constructive in working against the system of racism, white supremacy?
Well, there's a saying that a tree is known by the fruit it bears. And so I would hope that people would see by the fruit that we bear. Now, that being said, I've had situations where, and I just attribute this to the degree of sickness that we're suffering from. I had a situation where we ran our Vanguard experience one year, and we do it in the summer. Then the following fall, I was speaking with one of the parents, and one of the young men, he had completely turned his life around in terms of his attention to his academics, his responsibility around the house. He had just become more the young man that a parent would want, or that we would want in our community. And so as I'm talking to the parent, she was really excited about this, and I'm expecting her to acknowledge and to thank us for the work we had done. And the next thing out of her mouth was, yeah, he's playing football now. And I'm told that when they get involved in sports, that helps them to straighten up. And it was a humbling experience, because I thought, wow, we spent 4 weeks with this young man, 24 hours a day, and she doesn't attribute any of that work to his change. She attributes it to him playing sports. And the reality is, with this young man in particular, he played sports before he even came to us. But at the same time, I realized that if we're able to do our work, whether people acknowledge it or not, it doesn't matter as much. We're looking for the results more so than the acknowledgement. But the acknowledgement is good. It keeps you going. It keeps you encouraged. But even without the acknowledgement, as long as we're having an impact, that's what's valuable.
Let's see, where's the okay. It says on the website C.O.W.S.Institute.org that C.O.W.S. teaches K through 12th grades. What grades do you teach specifically?
Well, I'm not sure what part you were referring to. Do you look at the outreach page?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because you were breaking up. Hello? Yeah?
Yes. Are you looking at the... yes, can you hear me now? Are you looking at the outreach page? Okay. So what that says is that we collaborate with K-12 schools and districts. And it also says we'll collaborate with universities, with churches, with community organizations. So we don't teach any one grade exclusive of others, but if there is a school or a program that has a need, that has black children that has a need in STEM areas, we will work with them. One thing that we do offer is we offer curriculums that schools can use. So many times we have well-intentioned teachers who are working with our children who just don't know what to do. And sometimes this happens in our churches. So you might have a vacation Bible school, and you want to do something science-related, but you don't have a science background, and so you're looking for something to do. Well, we can offer you curriculums that you can use with your young people in that after-school program. And depending on the proximity and the time and your availability, we also will offer training for that as well. So that's just one example of the type of work that we'll do. I have a number of doctoral students and some who have graduated and are now practitioners or professors in some cases, and practitioners in other cases. And they speak with community groups. They will conduct workshops and seminars. I'll do that myself as well on some occasions. And so if people invite us out, I know not too long ago we gave a keynote address at the NSBE Regional 3 conference. So that's the type of outreach work that we do. And again, it's not grade specific. Does that answer your question?
Yes. What should, well, as a homeschool pupil, what should I make sure I learn in science and math?
You say you are being homeschooled?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a very good question. Well, I'll give you. I'm gonna go back to the article that we began with, because in it I prescribed 5 things that black children need to know. And the first thing is what we generally would get anyway, and that is content. And whatever the science topic is, just for the sake of this discussion, let's say that the content area is the food system. And by food system, I'm referring to the process by which we grow, harvest, and distribute food. Right? That's a food system. So in terms of content, every black child needs to know the content related to the food system. So we would want to be able to answer that question, what is the food system? Now, I say this is what you typically get in schools. In schools, you've studied, I think earlier we mentioned acid-base chemistry, or in mathematics it might be algebraic functions. So we can all answer, what is acid-base chemistry? What is photosynthesis? What is an algebraic function? That's the content. The reason content is important, and I said earlier that they waste a lot of our time, don't have meaning to us later in life, and that is true. However, the reason it's important for us at this stage of our existence is because if we're going to contribute to our people, we need access to certain institutions. Justice, you may one day want to be a doctor, and if you do, you've got to pass the MCAT, and then you've got to pass your board exams. And on those exams, they're going to ask you, what is the gallbladder? How many bones are in the spine? How many vertebrae make up the spine? So that's where those content questions become important. But that's only one type of mastery. The second type of mastery that we need is currency. And that is, we have to get a sense of why this thing is relevant to human beings in general. So we would ask, how and where is the food system relevant to humans in daily life? The third, now, I would say once you hit those 2 masteries, that's where school stops for Europeans. And if we stop there with Africans, we're doing them a disservice. The other masteries, whites get them, they just don't get them in school. They get them in other places. The problem is that we don't have access to them in other places. I'm going to give you the other 3. The third mastery is context. And context helps us to get a sense of how the subject matter is important to people of African descent. So currency says how it's important to humans in general. The third is how is it important to Africans. So with our food systems example, we would ask, in what ways are food systems important to people of African descent? I'm going to just give you one example. There is a class of disease that we associate with African Americans: diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and high blood pressure. Those are associated with African Americans. Around the turn of the century, now, Justice, this is not your century. Your century is going from the 1900s to 2000s. This is the other century, going from the 1800s to the 1900s. So over 100 years ago, white physicians and dentists and scientists were traveling the world documenting what they saw. And one of their observations was that wherever people had a Western diet, they had 4 diseases: obesity, hypertension, high blood pressure, and diabetes. And so they began to call those diseases Western diseases. Now, I'm saying Western, but Western means white or European. So when I say Western diseases, you can say white diseases. So we should ask ourselves the question: if these are white diseases caused by the white diet, why do we associate it with African people? Okay, going back to this mastery, our context mastery. It's important for us to know that there's something unique about this food system that causes sickness in our people. And there's reasons for that. But let me go to the fourth area of mastery. The fourth area of mastery is critique. And when we think about critique, we want to position our students to be able to answer, how can my understanding of food systems help me to understand the mechanism by which colonialism is maintained? Or we could replace colonialism and say racism, white supremacy. Or we could replace it and say oppression. But I'm just referring to that system that keeps the white boot on your neck. So critique helps us to answer, how does this topic, food system, contribute to racism, white supremacy? Now, I'll go back to our food system example. And this is really interesting. We don't really think about this, but food is a weapon of war. It explains slavery. It explains the jobs that most people go to. Most people don't like their jobs, but they go every day. Why do they go? Because they got to eat. And they can't eat unless they make that paycheck and go to the grocery store. Now remember, Gus, we said earlier that we don't know how to go from rubber tree to rubber. Just like we don't know how to go from rubber tree to rubber, we don't know how to go from wheat to loaf of bread. We don't know how to go from chicken running around in the field to chicken on the dinner table. I mean, how many people in modern times has butchered and processed the chicken? We don't do that sort of thing anymore. It explains how they're able to keep us enslaved. And to a lesser degree, because we had more of a knowledge back then, but even still, to a degree that it's a bit of a challenge to strike it out on your own and master nature yourself. So in that sense, food is a weapon of war. And we should work and understand the food system. We don't want to just know what it is. We don't just want to know how it's relevant to humankind. We don't just want to know how it's relevant to people of African descent. We also want to know, how does this thing that I'm learning, how does the food system contribute to racism, white supremacy? And then the last mass is conduct. And that just, the question is, given my knowledge of the food system, what should I, as a responsible African, what should I do? So with that knowledge of the food system, knowing that the Western food system causes diseases, knowing that my lack of access to it is what they use to control me, one thing that we should do is we should have at least a small garden in our backyard. If we don't have a backyard, we should at least have a tomato plant on our deck. If we don't have a deck, at least we should have some herbs in our kitchen. You know, we need to take back some control of our production and consumption and distribution of food. We need to control our food system. So when you ask the question, what should you know about science? I would say science and math, apply these 5 questions to your learning, and then get your information from a wide variety of sources. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes, sir. Do you have science curriculum for 7th grade?
Do I have science what now?
Do you have science curriculum for 7th grade?
Well, I'm not sure why, Justice, but you're breaking up a little bit, and I just could not make out what you said. Try it again.
Let's see. Here, I'll adjust my microphone. Okay. Can I be heard now?
Right there.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Do you have science curriculum for 7th grade?
Science curriculum for 7th grade.
Yes.
I do have. Let's see. Yes, we do have some curriculums. I wouldn't say they're specifically for 7th grade because we don't write them for a given grade, but they could be used for 7th grade. We have one very good one that's a microbiology unit. And microbiology is a fun subject to learn, but typically you don't get it until you get to college. And if you were interested in that curriculum, I'd be more than happy to share it with you. So you would be able to learn quite a bit about microbes and about, we do even some food processing in that curriculum. And most of what you would do, you can do with things you have at home. There's a couple of things where you would need some equipment that we don't typically have at home, but it wouldn't be very difficult to get. Would you be interested in that?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe you can have Gus send me some contact information, or maybe I could even just send it to Gus, and then he could get it to you.
Okay, and also I have to talk to my parents about that too. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Mhm. And I would also be interested. If you did have like a 7th grade science, I think I would be really interested into that.
Okay. Oh, I will certainly keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do have more questions, but I'm going to go back to Gus.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Context of white supremacy. The website again for Dr. Mutegi, sankoreinstitute.org. sankoreinstitute.org. It is in the description at TalkShoe, so you can copy, paste, click it, should work. You touched on the importance of context already, and when you were giving your, 5 goals, 5 specific goals that would put black students in a better position to change, destroy the system of white supremacy, which is responsible for the deficiencies that we experience in all areas of activities. I used the term praxis. I thought that was a very important concept. Can you explain what you mean when you say praxis?
Yes. Now, praxis is, I don't know where the word originates. I typically associate it with Freire's work. But basically, it just refers to theory-informed practice. So the idea is that we don't want to just go out and do something. We want to go out and do something that we've thought about and that we have evidence that it would be addressing a real problem. I use the term more because I'm in academia, and it's a term that academicians can appreciate and understand. But even beyond that, I don't want to appear cynical or crass, but that is the primary reason for using the term. But even beyond that, I have come to observe that we don't spend much time working to understand the problems that are confronting us. And I'm going to share a vignette if you don't mind. I have a colleague who is with a community organization, and I won't name the city in which they work. But the organization has found that black boys are being suspended at a much higher rate. And I don't think it's black boys, I think it's black girls as well. But the black students are being suspended at a much higher rate. Sometimes they're suspended at rates 4 and 5 times their percentage of the population. And when you look into the reasons for the suspension, it's always the category other. And so when you ask the district, well, what is meant by other? they give you very, very amorphous ideas. Well, the other is insubordination, or it's they were defiant. Well, what is insubordination or defiant? What does that look like? What does that mean? And so I'm wondering, and the group is wondering, are they kicking black kids out of school because they don't want to deal with the black kids? That's what it looks like. So in working to address this problem, and here's where the action without thinking comes in working to deal with this problem, the community group wanted to first consult with the schools who were suspending the boys to be sure that they were aware that they were suspending them. Well, to my mind, it doesn't make any sense because the people you're going to meet with did the suspension, so they know who they suspended. They gave you the data, so they know the rate at which they suspended them. So that's not an intelligent way to me to go about fixing that problem, And I give you there may be some politics behind that as well. But this notion of praxis says that, look, if you just go doing stuff without thinking about it, you're a dangerous person, right? And if you think without doing something, then you're a useless person. So we don't want to just sit in the world of theory on one hand, and we don't want to just sit in the world of action on the other hand. No, we want to bring these two things together. We want to do something meaningful, think about what we did, do it again, make some modifications, fix it, go back, evaluate it again, and work again. So there's this back and forth between our theorizing and our action, and that's the notion of praxis.
Very important. Very important. Wow. And that's any term. You should not be intimidated by terms. You just get people to explain them in a way that,
right,
you can understand what they're saying and rock and roll. That's all. Very simple. I wanted to touch on, I thought this was really important. This is taken from the same report. Y'all have to forgive me. I normally enjoy reading great information on the program. I hope my weekend voice is not messing it up. If it is, you can go and read Dr. Mutegi's work for yourself. I'm telling you, brilliant report. I'll put the link up so you can download the PDF file from what I'm reading from. This paragraph, you have a quote and then you have your own words where you continue to elaborate. And you write, all human cultures have included study of nature, the movement of heavenly bodies, the behavior of animals, the properties of materials, the medicinal properties of plants. The recommendations in this chapter focus on the development of science, mathematics, and technology in Western culture, but not on how that development drew on ideas from earlier Egyptian, Chinese, Greek, and Arabic cultures. The sciences accounted for in this report are largely part of a tradition of thought that happened to develop in Europe during the last 500 years, a tradition to which people from all cultures contribute today. Taken together, this assumption has shaped current science education reform such that it is very much an attempt to standardize, in fact, westernize the whole of science education such that what is produced are students of all races who know, admire, and appreciate science as practiced in Western white culture to the exclusion of science as practiced in other cultures. So if students come to know one method, if students only come to know one method by which humans study and interact with nature, that being the way represented by Western white modern science, it is very difficult for them to be critical consumers of it. They have nothing against which to compare it. Such a condition is especially problematic for African Americans. In order to ameliorate the prevailing colonial structures under which they live, They must understand it and be critical of it. It is difficult for them to be critical about any specific scientific practices if they have not been able to conceptualize alternative practices. Very powerful point, in my opinion. I don't think I had really thought about that. Can you share some details on that, Dr. Mutegi?
Sure. And I'll just say that the first part that you read was me quoting a text, Science for All Americans, and that book was actually the precursor to the National Science Education Standards that we discussed earlier in the show. And so when they acknowledge that all human cultures have practiced science, but that the science they're going to focus on is the science practiced by Europeans, my commentary to that is, okay, so basically what you want is you want all people, white and non-white, to just love and admire white science. And that is a problem. And if it was good for humankind, I would have no issue with it. If it was good for black people, why would we be mad at that? We want what's good, don't we? But it's not good for us. And I'm going to give you one example, just to illustrate how the different practice of science and technology really affects us, or can affect us. We take it as a given that cities are polluted. That I remember I used to live in Pittsburgh a number of years ago, and Pittsburgh was a big steel town. It was a steel town years before I moved there. But many of the people who lived there during that era also lived there when I was there, so they would tell the stories of how polluted the city was and how congested the air became. I'm told that when a businessman went to work in the morning, he had to take his white dress shirt, fold it up and put it in his briefcase, and then he'd put it on once he got to the office. But if he wore it on the way to work, it'd be black with soot by the time he got to the office. So you had this giant industry of smelting steel, such that the whole city was just dust covered. Well, that's interesting. We take it as a given that if you're working with steel, you're going to have a high degree of pollution. And since we have nothing else to compare it against, we kind of go with that idea. We can't imagine another possibility. I'm going to give you another possibility. In Tanzania, there are a group of people known as the Haya people. Haya is spelled H-A-Y-A. And there are two professors from Brown University. I think it was in the mid-'70s when they discovered, and put discovered in quotes, when they discovered the Haya people, or discovered that the Haya people had steel-making knowledge themselves. The Haya had been making steel for nearly 1,000 years before the Europeans learned how to make steel. The first European learned to make steel in about the 1800s, and that method was refined by an American. It was a Brit who first discovered it, and then a guy in Eddyville, Kentucky, here in the States, refined his methods. And that's generally what they credit with being the start of steel making. But the Haya had been making steel, like I said, about 1,000 years before that. And the Haya made their steel along the coast of Lake Victoria. They passed the tradition down orally. And they didn't just make small bits of steel. You know, we might have the idea that they made enough to make some forks, some knives and spoons. But they actually supplied many others with the metal they needed for their weapons. So if you're supplying, and this is when people fought with swords and shields and spears and so forth, arrowheads probably. So if you're providing all the steel that you need for weapons for armies of nations, you're making a lot of steel. But never, when archaeologists go and explore Tanzania, they don't dig up artifacts of these gigantic pollution-creating factories. So my point is that it is possible to practice science at a high level with a level of sophistication that doesn't also carry with it many of the negative things that we find when Europeans practice science. we can also talk about the food industry. I don't know of any other population of people, from my knowledge of history. I'm a historian by training, but I do read a lot, and I've never read about the culture whose food made them sick, except for ours. Literally, our food makes us sick, and we keep eating it. So, but to make sense of that and to see it as problematic, we've got to do some comparison, and we've got to say, okay, well, how did people in other cultures eat and consume food, and what are the differences? And we can give examples ad nauseum, but my point is that point of comparison is essential, first to give us the mindset that what we have can be questioned, and also to give us an idea of how what we have can be changed and improved upon.
Very important, very important, especially the food example. And I guess I would just throw out for listeners, I think the damage that racism, white supremacy has done to black people, I'd say non-white people on the whole, but especially black people, I think for a lot of us, if you begin to get information, black people, examples that you used about black people in Africa who, have their own process for making steel that doesn't produce all the pollution, totally different way of doing things, the brain trashing that we have been subjected to, I don't think we tend to look at the white way of doing things and then other ways of doing things as just, okay, this is just two different methods for accomplishing a task. It tends to be
right.
The white way is way up here. This is, next to God in terms of the way you want to do it. And then everything else is, that's just, some backwards, savage foolishness. And I feel like once that gets started, everything about their system, all areas of activity, enforces that worldview that it's the white way is the right way, and everybody else is dumb and ignorant and backwards, and they should try and figure out how to be like us white people as soon as possible. And I feel like once that gets, and it's like once that gets started, it's hard to get. It's like once that sail has taken full bloom, the ship is out. It's hard to get that back. Like you kind of got to start from the very beginning. That okay, we're going to learn and compare, and we're not going to privilege the white way of doing things, even if we are in a society dominated by white supremacy. Does that make sense, Dr. Mutegi?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to touch on the other report as well, and I also want to let folks know if you dialed in, if you have questions you'd like to ask Dr. Mutegi. If you're on the TalkShoe line, *8. If you're on the Free HD line, it's *6. If you have any questions, I see some hands going. I'll actually save my questions till later. I'll get Justice, and then I'll go to the phone lines. Justice, you had some more questions. If you do, feel free.
Can I be heard now? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How does the importance of STEM help people of the African descent?
You're saying how does the importance of STEM help people of African descent?
Yes.
That's the question? Okay.
Yes.
I'm gonna answer it, but I'm gonna reword it a bit in order to answer it. So what I'll answer is, why is STEM important to people of African descent? I like it a little bit wordy. I'm going to give you an elaborate illustration to I think for the listeners it will help to shift how we think about and understand science. I want you to imagine being a human being in the natural world. And what I'm asking you to do is imagine living on planet Earth without all the creature comforts that surround us. No house, no car. You have a home, but something simple. You don't have concrete cities all over the place. It's just you, the ground, trees, animals, and whatever people and bodies of water you live near, whatever people that are okay. And now, as you envision yourself in the natural world, I want you to think about what it's like to survive. So that when I look at the human being as a biological organism in nature, the human is not a very fast being. There are many creatures faster than human beings. A deer comes to mind. It's not one of us that can outrun a deer. And so if you think you're going to eat by running and catching up with that deer and tackling them, you're going to be hungry. And even if you don't have to run and catch up with the deer to eat them, you and the deer might be getting chased by a jaguar, and if that's the case, guarantee you'll be the one to get caught, not the deer. So we're slow. That's my point. We're not that big. We're not that strong. I can't think of too many animals. Even animals that are smaller than us many times are stronger than us. Ants carry hundreds of times their body weight. Dogs, incredibly strong. Most of the wild cats, incredibly strong. Bears, very strong animals. So I'm looking at how we can compete in nature. First of all, we're not very fast. Second of all, we're not very strong. We're not very big. We don't have any unique adaptations. So lizards can turn invisible by camouflaging themselves against a structure. You have other creatures like birds, which can sprout wings, and they can take flight and flee from danger. And then you have humans. We don't have invisibility. We can't fly. The only adaptation that scientists tell us we have is we have an opposable thumb so that we can pick up things. Well, if you give me a choice between turning invisible to save myself or an opposable thumb, give me invisibility. Give me the Superman adaptation. Make me fly. But the thumb is not that great of an adaptation. When we reproduce, it's very slow and inefficient. So insects will give birth to millions at a time. Most animals give birth to 10, 15 at a time. Humans give birth to one offspring at a time. And it takes an incredibly long to carry the human child to term. 40 weeks is almost a year. And when a child is born, unlike a colt or a foal, I think you call it, a horse's offspring, that horse falls out the mother and stands up and can start running. Boy, it takes a human about 9 years before it can live independent of its mother to some degree. And even then, it's not very efficient. So when you ask how is science important to people that can be science, look at human beings in nature. Science is really our only adaptation in the natural world. So if human beings don't do science, human beings will die. We are able to predict and to control nature better than any other of God's creatures. Now, where this is especially important for us, for Africans, is that somebody came in and they took away our knowledge of nature. So we don't know how to make our own food. We don't know how to read the stars. I don't know how many people have no idea of constellations. We've heard of them. I've heard of this big dipper, but we can't find it in the sky. We don't know which way is north, south, east, and west. We can't read a map when it's given to us. We have no ability to navigate the natural world. And on the most basic level, we are wholly dependent on our enslaver, because we don't know how to live and navigate in the natural world. That's why science is important. A friend of mine told me just yesterday, Gus and Justice, you all both probably know of the Korean takeover of the hair care industry. We've gotten to the point we can't even make chemicals to make our hair nice. That's incredibly bad. We don't make toothpaste. We don't make toilet paper. We cannot currently do the most basic things to ensure our existence as decent people. Well, the friend of mine that called the other night, she said, I've learned there are a few new black hair care companies. And so she was giving me the names of those companies so that we can look into that. But I got so excited. Okay, good. We have some ability of desire to maintain some control over our fate in the natural world. But if we're going to live to be the people that God created, that God put on this planet, we've got to be able to take care of ourselves in nature. And that's why science is so important.
Why do you want to be a member of the AERA?
a member of, did you say AERA?
Mhm. It's
Okay.
it stands for the world's uh. Go ahead. Or
Yeah,
right there.
AERA is the American Educational Research
Oh,
Association, and that is the world's
yeah.
largest educational research association. Okay, so as part of my work, I am a member of and active in professional associations, and I learned a few years back that I can't go to all the meetings. But there was a time when I would try to go to 3 or 4 meetings a year, and it's very, very taxing. Just it's hard to spend so much time away from home, and at some point it's hard to be on that long for that long of a period of time. So I chose to go on 2 associations, and one just as you just read, which is AERA, American Educational Research Association, and the other is NARST, the National Association of Research and Science Teaching. And this might be useful if there's any young people who are listening. But in terms of making decisions for yourself professionally, and at least if you're navigating independently employed, and if you're navigating a larger institution, like for me it would be the university in my field as a science educator. So one of the things to consider is which associations are most valued by my peers. That's one consideration. Another consideration are which associations am I most comfortable with, given the choices that are available. And then also, which of the associations are best suited for me to advance myself in my career. And so that, Justice, is why I'm an active member in those 2 associations. Now, I'm a member of other associations, but those are the 2 that I'm most active in. I actually will sit on committees, and I attend the conferences every year for the most part.
Do you have any white friends?
Well, I have white coworkers. I have white colleagues. I have whites that I've grown up with. I have associates. I have very few friends, and those that I will call friends that are those people that are close to me. Amongst that group, there aren't any that are white.
Okay. What does the question mark? Well, it's on the front page of your website. What does the question mark mean on the plate? And yeah. What does that mean? It's a meat question mark.
It signifies that we don't know what's food. Right. It's that's actually cut a steak, and it's a question mark on the steak, and it's to suggest to the viewer, basically, what is this? I'm going to share with you something interesting. I don't know if we've actually posted the story or not, but so much centers around food, and it's not. It's the new one. That might be it. So much centers around food, and it's just what's happening in society now. With what Europeans are doing to the food system. They're now working on
Excuse me, can you?
Growing meat in a laboratory. You can't hear me? Hello?
I can.
Hello?
Do you mind if you? Hello? Yep. You can be heard.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, do you think you can start a little bit from the beginning? Because I think white people are doing their job of messing. I think they're messing up the quality
Okay, so
of
the
the
first
program.
part.
Mhm.
Okay, start over. So what I was saying was that first answering your question about the question mark on the plate, and it's just to signify or to suggest to the reader that we don't really know what we're eating or what's in our meat. And then I began to tell a story, and this is actually posted on the website. It's under the story, The New White Meat. The new white meat. But basically, tissue engineers are working to grow meat in a laboratory in petri dishes. They grow it like the same way you grow, and well, you don't grow Jello, but it has the consistency of Jello when it's grown. And so the story is about that process and what their hopes are with the synthetic meat. And periodically, when I come across stories like this, I like to share it with people because I think that our innate reaction or our innate position is to assume that what scientists are doing is good and is for the betterment of mankind, and that if they're doing it, it must be okay. And so I just want to at least put a question mark in our minds so that we can say, well, I should look at this more closely. Maybe it's not okay. And I'm not very definitively telling people this is bad for the following reasons. I don't have enough information that I can convincingly tell you why it's bad. It's bad to me because it's not natural, and that's enough for me, but I wouldn't give you that as an argument. But I at least people to know what it is and to be able to have enough information to question it.
Excuse me. Thank you very much for coming on this program. Actually, for part 2. Yeah, thank you very much, and I don't have any more questions for you at this time.
All right, thank you, Justice.
Mm-hmm.
The person who dialed in on the talk show line, you had a hand up. Person who called from California with a hand up. Did you have a question for Dr. Mutegi?
Hello, greetings.
Greetings, 909. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, lucked out. Yeah, it's hard for me to hear your guest. I don't know what kind of phone he's on or if it's just the connection, but it's going in and out. Sure, Doctor, if you could.
Oh, go ahead.
Justice?
Oh,
yeah, I was going to ask the doctor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask the doctor. I mean, I don't know what kind of phone you're on, but if you could, I don't know if there's any kind of adjustments that you can make with it, or talk slower or something, because it's just getting harder and harder for you to be heard. So I just want to say that first.
Okay, thank you, caller. And Gus, I'm on a regular landline, so I'm not sure what I can do differently.
I suspect white people could be interfering. I suspect it's probably the internet. I guess I'll say number one, TalkShoe is consistently has difficulties. I think some other people said their connection got dropped and it froze their computer trying to access. I hate TalkShoe. I think the free HD line generally is clear. I think I'll say that again. That line tends to be a little bit clearer for folks who want to listen in. I'll check out the podcast recording to see if it's clear or if there's any distortion there. But like I said, the TalkShoe line generally does have more difficulties than the free HD line.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the caller,
Doctor. I was going to say that if you give your answer nice and loud, the recording will probably record you clearly, even if I won't hear you, and then I could possibly just listen to the recording and get the clear answer, just in case. If not, I don't hear you. I just want to know that. Who is your favorite scientist?
Well, I will balk at answering that. I don't really have a favorite scientist per se, but I will say that I almost always go out of my way to try to talk about George Washington Carver, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if I mentioned this on your last show or not, Gus. I probably did, but it bears repeating. George Washington Carver was probably one of the greatest scientific minds of modern times. they have given us Newton, and they've given us Einstein, and they give us Stephen Hawking. What he did 3 things in his career, each of which would easily merit him a Nobel Prize had he done nothing else. The first thing Carver did, first let me tell you about his history. So Carver is about 4 years old, and his family was stolen. They were slaves. They were enslaved, and they were stolen by slave robbers. Everybody was killed except for Carver. And slave catchers actually recovered them. Now, if you've read anything about slave robbers and slave catchers, these are 2 groups of people that the slave don't want to see because they're completely backwards, more so than the slave master himself, and very abusive. And so we don't really know fully what happened to Carver when he was in the hands of the slave robber or the slave catcher, but he did survive. And they took him back to the plantation, so he lived his life. He wasn't able to do any work after whatever torture they put him through, any field work, so he pretty much worked around the house. He goes to school, finishes, gets his degree. He wanted to become an artist, but they wouldn't allow him into the School of Art, so he went to the School of Science. Finishes, and then he went to Tuskegee to work. When he got to Tuskegee, they didn't have any equipment, they didn't have any labs, so he took his students out to a local junkyard, and they got whatever bottles and parts they could use to make a lab. That is phenomenal. I wouldn't say that's necessarily worthy of a Nobel Prize, but it's phenomenal. The first thing he did that was Nobel Prize worthy is he identified a pestilence that was moving from west to east across the country, and it was destroying cotton crops. And he predicted that it would hit, he predicted when it would hit, and he went and told sharecroppers about the pestilence, and he gave them solutions for it was the boll weevil, was the insect that was destroying the cotton crops. He taught them about crop rotation. Now, crop rotation is really an old technology. We practiced it in Africa centuries ago. Europeans never practiced crop rotation until Carver reintroduced the idea of crop rotation into the U.S. That one act alone could have earned him the Nobel Prize. What the sharecroppers told Carver was that, you know, we would like to grow something else. We understand and we believe you, but we can't sell anything else. Cotton is the only thing people will buy. And so Carver went back into the lab, and he started looking for industrial uses for the crops. This is the third thing that would have won him that prize. Not only does he say, look, you need to grow something else to protect your livelihood. That's number one. That's number 2. Number 1 is something's going to destroy your crops. That's number 1. Number 2, you need to grow something else for your livelihood. Here's a way you can do it. Number 3 is, since you don't have an alternative means, I'm going to create an alternative means for you. Before Carver, Europeans didn't have the idea that you could grow food products and use them for anything other than food. Carver said, no, you can grow food products and use them in industrial applications. So he would take the oil from the seed of a plant, and he would take that seed oil, and he said, you know what, we can burn this in an engine for fuel. We refer to diesel fuel as what powers trucks. Diesel is a European who really based his wealth on Carver's technology. Do you understand the magnitude of what I'm saying to you?
Yes,
Caller?
sir.
Okay, I didn't know if you all can hear me. So, on at least 3 counts, Carver's work was phenomenal. Just to give you a sense of how valuable he was, Henry Ford tried to lure Carver away from Tuskegee, and he offered him a salary that would, in today's dollars, equal about $1 million per year. Now, I'm a university professor, and I can tell you, even our highest paid administrators at my university very rarely, if ever, see anything close to $1 million a year. You got to be the football coach at Penn State or Florida State University to see $1 million a year. Ford is saying to Carver, I value your research so much that I will pay you $1 million per year to come work for Ford. Carver said, no, I will make the offer, but I'm able to help black people in my current position. In response to that, Ford builds a research facility next to Tuskegee University so that his scientists could go over to Tuskegee and consult with Carver on an ongoing basis. Hands down, George Washington Carver is probably the most brilliant scientific mind in modern times. I would consider him to be a modern day Imhotep.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I definitely admire George Washington Carver. What's the definitive work on George Washington Carver? Did he do his memoirs himself, or who did the work on him? Because I have a small book on him, and I haven't read it. But what would you recommend a definitive work of on him?
To be honest, there is one that's called In His Own Words that I have, but my knowledge of Carver has been actually accumulated from a number of different sources, and there is no one that stands out as definitive. And basically what I'm saying is I haven't read one that's written from our perspective. So you'll read what somebody else wrote about Carver, and looking at it with a critical eye, you'll pull out of it how great he was. There's also been a few documentaries on Carver and on his life.
Gus, can I ask a question? One more?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that leads into my next question. Now, you talk about the Haya and the Still, and I know some different African tribes, man, that were working with Still, and some of that technology is lost. When I see white people that go to Africa and they, get initiated in some of these African ways, they end up creating. They do experiments and they do the things in laboratories that the Africans taught them, and I just think that that's a big. That's important. Like the experiments, and with the Haya, like have you ever worked with Still before? I mean, Still for a moment it was I just thought like that was one of my favorite materials till I started learning more about electromagnetism and whatnot, and how it can interfere with gravity and electromagnetism. I didn't really want to work with it anymore. But have you ever worked with Steel? And do you know? I mean, I know some black sculptors and whatnot, but do you get what I'm saying? It's like these technologies. I know white people, they learn the technology, they reproduce it, and they do experiments and whatnot. Black people, they learn about the technology, but they never do experiments. What's your views on experimentation in science, and how important is that?
Well, I'll say that goes back to the fact that different cultures will practice science in different ways. And so, and I like the point you raised. I'm just going to elaborate on it a little bit because I want to emphasize it. Not to change what you said, but to emphasize what you said. So what Europeans are doing is they go to what they call indigenous cultures, many African cultures, many Native American cultures in South America, and they mine these people for their scientific knowledge. So there may be a tribe that doesn't have any, this is a made-up example, so don't think this really exists. It doesn't. I'm just making up an example. They may go to a tribe that doesn't have any instances of malaria, and they'll go and find out, okay, why don't they have any malaria? Is it genetic, or do they do something to treat it? And so they find out that there's a certain plant that they chew to prevent them from getting malaria. So then whites will take that back to the lab. Then they'll start doing experiments. They'll try to figure out what is the active ingredient in the plant, and then they'll get a patent on it. So that if any, then they violated the white intellectual property. Well, that's a real insidious system, and there are organizations set up to do this. What's so insidious about it is they're stealing knowledge, and then they're claiming it as their own, and then they go the extra step of preventing you from having access to the knowledge that was not theirs in the first place. It's more natural, definitely is more beneficial to humankind, that if you have a treatment for something, you just use it, and if somebody else needs it, you let them use it as well. Does that not make sense? Why would I have a cure for a disease, patent it, so that only I have the cure and nobody else has a cure? We're talking about a different mindset, and it's manifest not only in the culture, but in the way that those people practice science.
Did that answer your question, 909?
No, not really. I'm just asking fundamentally. The higher they have a technology. They have a way of working with steel. Do you know of any non-white person that has taken? I mean, you know about the. Have you ever conducted experiments, or have you ever reproduced any of the things that you've learned about in a lab, in the garage, anywhere? Do you know of any non-white people that's doing that? And do you? And how important do you think that is? And do you see a disconnect, or like a just in the philosophy of black people knowing knowledge and black people non-white people knowing a certain knowledge and non-white people applying knowledge? It just seems. I just was wondering what you thought about that and your own personal experience. Not so much personal, but just if you understand it, just to my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I do, but I'll take a stab at it. If you're asking, do I know of non-white people who? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just saying the philosophy. How important do you think it is to apply the knowledge that we learn? You talk about science. Science is like a doing, and I was just wondering.
When you say apply, you mean creating things, like creating steel, versus what? What would not be applying?
Reading about it, talking about it, every aspect to be understood and talking about it. But you yourself going in there, turning on the kettle or turning on the heat, putting the steel down, and like doing it, so you can say like that's wisdom. I've done it. Well, not so much wisdom, but knowledge. I have the knowledge of it because I've done it myself. I've worked with these materials. I've seen it work. I've worked with these herbs, and I've seen them. I've taken these herbs, and I've seen them work. I just don't see black people being able to talk about it in that way, and I think that people just be like, well, okay, that's just some more information, but you haven't even worked with any of these things yourself. It's just, and I see white people working with these things all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And now, as an educator, I see that one of the reasons for that is access. So I'll just use another example. I was in a middle school in Pittsburgh, and I took a guest to visit one of the classrooms. I think it was an 8th grade classroom. And after class, the teacher explained that he normally would teach the lesson that he taught as a lab, but he didn't want to take the glassware out because the students would break it. Now, this is a black school. And I didn't say this to him because I was a guest in his classroom, but my first thought was, yeah, students are going to break glassware. That's what it's there for. That's how you learn. By making some mistakes, you're going to break some stuff. You sweep it up, but you've been enriched because you've actually, like you say, brother, you've gotten your hands on it, and you've gotten an intimate, in-depth experience. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. We can learn in several ways. We can learn very well vicariously. We can hear a good story, we can see a good movie, and we can walk away with a sense of a thing. But it always carries more meaning for us if we are actually fully engaged in that thing itself. So if I watch a movie like Outbreak about these microbiologists trying to figure out this disease, that's insightful. I get something from it. But if I actually go into a lab every day and I smell the agar and actually watch the bacteria growing on the plate and actually have to go through the task of counting the colonies, I learn it, and I learn it at a greater depth. So, and that's probably an action item that our listeners can walk away with, where our educational institutions, I say our, but they're not ours, the educational institutions that we attend, where they may limit our access, we can supplement that for them. So it's not hard to get science kits or science equipment from a regular retail store. You can get chemistry sets and that sort of thing. It's not really hard to get science equipment from a science supplier. If you were to go online and Google Carolina Biological Supply, you don't need any special license or permission to order a kit. And you can get some decent science activities that will serve 30 kids for under $50. So if I'm a youth group leader, or if I have a Boy Scout troop, or if I have a group at my local church, and I say I want them to learn more about science and I want them to get some experience, I can go to Carolina Biological Supply. I can order a kit. It'll tell me what they should be doing. And even if I don't fully know, and even if the kids don't fully know, we can learn together, and I can actually give them that experience. We need to do that because we're not getting that type of direct, firsthand experience many times through our schools.
Thank you very much. That was a great answer. Great answer.
Thank you.
I mean, the fact that he didn't want to break the glass is like it's just sitting there looking pretty and nobody's working with it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I see it. And do you think that might be some pressure, just him being a black male, him thinking, these resources? I mean, if you're not using them, wow.
Yeah, and actually that teacher was not a black male. That was a white male. And I think that a big part of it was how he regarded the students and the value he put on them. So, those of us who have children, I remember when my son was young and I had to teach him how to wash dishes, I bought some dishes especially for him to break. So I said, well, he's going to learn and he's going to drop some. So I'm going to get something that's a little more expendable than the good stuff, because he has to learn that skill. And that has to be our attitude to some degree. But that's the attitude when you're working with children who you're concerned about their development. Now, when you're teaching other people's children and you're less concerned about their development, then you might just not let them have that experience. Because the glassware becomes more important than their learning.
Wow. Context of white supremacy. I was curious because this just popped up in a film, and I actually hear Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She references the brilliance of Dr. Carver on a regular basis. And specifically, she always talks about he talked to the plants. She references that all the time. He was able to communicate with the plants, and that's one. You talk about that difference. The white way, everybody else is backwards, ignorant, stupid, savage, just some foolishness. And I feel like I've heard white people kind of ridicule that and be like, "Oh yeah, that's talked about. That's some silliness, I just saw a film where white people are talking to plants. And another white person, he goes to ridicule. He goes to do the laugh and joke and say, oh, that's crazy. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And this white guy's talking to plants, and he's like a botanist. And he turns around and he says, oh, no, no, no. It's been scientifically proven. Plants respond to human stimuli. It's been proven. They've got records. And, and he keeps on talking. And by the end of the film, the white guy that was joking and saying, oh, this guy's kind of crazy, he is now talking to the plants. And I just thought that was really interesting. Do you have any thoughts on what Dr. Carver's reported to have been able to do in him communicating with the plants?
You know, I'm stepping outside of solid ground, but I'm just going to share my personal, not my professional, just my personal take on that. He was criticized once by other scientists for. He was asked a question about how he learns so much, and he said that each morning he goes into his garden and the plants talk to him, and was ridiculed for that. But his response was, well, you haven't discovered this, I have. So who are you to tell me how I discovered it? If I say that the plants talk to me, then they talk to me. Now, when I look at it, I'm not so dismissive, because I have a sense that there is a way of knowing things beyond our ability to comprehend how we knew it. We've all experienced. You might have a hunch, we call it a hunch sometimes, or a voice in our head, or something. We say, something just told me. Something told me I should call you. Something told me I should come by your house. And when I did, you needed my help. Or when I did, I found out something. We've all had that experience. So I'm not so dismissive of the fact that there may be something at work between, that's even on a level of real communication between science and human, that we don't have a full understanding of, such that we can articulate it. And if Carver was, for whatever reason, attuned to receiving that at a higher level than other people, who am I to say he was or he wasn't? Again, a tree is known by the fruit it bears. And so this man had some way of knowing something nobody else knew because of what he produced. That's the proof of it. He produced something that nobody else was able to produce. So I'm behind Carver on that one.
Me too. I think I mentioned this yesterday. Had yet another moment just hearing about the brilliance of Dr. Carver. I had another, yay, black people. Very good thing, I think, when you begin to look and realize the phenomenal accomplishments of black, and his family, particularly, the context of his life and the abuse he suffered because of racism, white supremacy. That is astounding, what he was able to accomplish. Wow. We're almost at the end of the broadcast. I definitely want to make sure I get in the website and the reports. I want to give out both titles, and I'll put the links up so people can download these and read them for yourself. The one we spent more time talking about, the inadequacies of science for all, and the necessity and nature of a socially transformative curriculum approach for African American science education. That's the one we spent more time talking about. And the other report, it's very closely related to this one. This is titled Curriculum as a Weapon for Combating Systemic Racism. Excellent reading material, and I'll say again, I think if you're just a black person, period, you will learn a lot. Very constructive reports, but especially if you have children, definitely want to check these out. Excellent information. They're on the website, sankoreinstitute.org. And you can just go to the section on the website where they have essays and reports, and you can download it as a PDF file. I will make it easy and just link you directly to the specific reports. You can download them and check them out. But fantastic information. Dr. Mutegi, always a pleasure to have you on the program. If there's any information you would like to share with our listeners about being involved with the C.O.W.S Institute, or anything you would like to kind of let our listeners know, things that they should be looking out for in terms of you producing or what the Institute in general is going to be doing, let us know.
Sure. Well, I'm going to just let you know now, for any listeners that use social media, Facebook in particular, if you want to keep up with Sankoray activities, another way you can do it is by tying into our, you can tell I don't know the terminology, right? I think you have to like our page. So you just search Sankoray Institute, the page will come up, you can like it. And periodically, when we have new publications, we'll let people know on the Facebook page as well as our other outlets. And we've got an interview coming out pretty soon. We've done part 1 of the interview. Part 2 is going to come out within the next couple of weeks. Ronald Mallett is a African-American professor of physics at the University of Connecticut. And this brother has gotten a patent on a time machine.
What?
So you didn't hear me wrong. You did not hear me wrong. Yes, he has a patent on a time machine. We've done the first interview with him, and you can actually hear the audio of that interview at Sankoray's website. You can also download it on iTunes. But we're going to release the second part of that interview within the next couple of weeks.
A time machine.
Correct.
Like time machine, like it's Monday, we can switch, and now it's Sunday last week. Time machine.
Time machine, like he's not able to transport people in time because the energy requirements are too great. But what he sees as feasible is that we might be able to transfer information, so that you live through today is Monday, and then on Friday you send yourself back a message and say, "Don't go to the meeting on Wednesday."
Oh gosh!
Yeah.
Wow!
It's strange times we're living in, but I want us to be kept abreast of what's going on, and the fact that he's an African by descent. That's all the more reason for us to know about his work.
Well, I'm just thinking. I mean, that the possibility sending messages back in time. Leave these white people alone. Leave them alone. Wow, that is incredible. I don't even know what to say. I'll have to sit down and think on that one. Yeah, we definitely would love to have you back on the program if you can, make time for us in our schedule. I'll check the recording and make sure the audio quality is good. The free HD recording should be better than the TalkShoe line and what have you. So hopefully that'll be good. But yeah, we would love to have you back on the broadcast to share more information. Always phenomenal to have you on the program.
I appreciate it, and I look forward to being back.
For sure.
Bye.
The address again, sankorayinstitute.org. sankorayinstitute.org. I will be looking for that interview. Time machine from a black person. Man, what to say on that one? I will do the commercial. We'll take a quick break, and just thank you again, Dr. Mutegi. It was incredibly informative for me. I hope listeners as well. Always constructive information from you, Dr. Mutegi. Thank you, and continue your brilliant work.
Thank you, Gus.
Yes, sir. Context. Oh, we had a question. I didn't see the question. Dr. Mutegi, are you still with us?
Yes, I haven't hung up yet.
Okay.
Yes, do you have another question?
I didn't see, I was not looking at the switchboard. I wanted to check if you have time. There was someone with a hand up to see if they had a question.
Yes, I will be brief, but I can answer this.
Okay. Topello, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, brother. Sorry, I'm calling in late. Please forgive that. I had just got the thing not too long ago, and I'm sorry I missed this good part of this discussion. It's very interesting on the science. I have to listen to it again. But when you mentioned about the brother with the time machine, the first thing that came to my mind was the movie Denzel Washington was in. And when you said sending these messages back. Now, my question is, how long ago did he have this patent? How long has it been? Because I suspect this machine is up and running.
It hasn't been very long. Well, I don't know about that.
Isn't
and I'm not saying defensively. I wouldn't say that because I wouldn't put anything past.
Isn't it true that in order to have a patent, it has to be feasible to work?
Yes, and what he has a patent on is the design of the machine. Now, what he's done in the laboratory is he's shown that in the lab he can create. What you have to create is a curvature in space-time, and they refer to it as closed time-like loops. And you also have to show that you can reverse. He's the analogy of stirring a cup of coffee, but it's and in physics it's called frame dragging, such that you can show that you're reversing the natural curvature of time in the opposite direction. He's been able to demonstrate that in the laboratory, but that in itself isn't time travel. That means that what's necessary for time travel we can create. And what he's doing now is he's working with an applied physicist to develop a better working model. The next thing they have to do is demonstrate that they can actually reverse the polarity of neutrons that are being streamed through it, and then they have to put the machine infrastructure around it. So he says that once he has funding, he would be able to, he envisions some rudimentary form within the next 10 years. Now, the reason I would tend to question if it already exists is because, unless he's just not being fully straightforward about it, but he's on the cutting edge of this work. And my interaction with him, he's only given indication that he only has so much information. But again, I wouldn't put it past the evildoers to have more than what they let on that they have.
Well said. Logical position to take, I think. Outstanding. Thank you for taking that extra couple minutes to respond to the listener's question. Thoroughly enjoyed it, Dr. Mutegi, and we will speak with you soon, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Bye.
Mm-hmm. Context of white supremacy. We'll do a quick. I'm echoing. I'm not sure what. Okay, it's gone now. We'll do a quick commercial break before we get ready to wrap up. Hang tight. Context. We'll be right back. Context of white supremacy.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas, to Europe, to Australia, to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past, it is our current reality. Be informed, be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs? Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at trimultimedia.com.
Hi everybody, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed-packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, for more information on racism, white supremacy, and to invest in my counter-racist efforts, please visit my blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
Yo, this is Wade, one half of the Black Twins, and I want y'all to check something out. Our latest project, Double Consciousness, the Mixed Message. This will be dropping October 2nd, 2011, featuring various audio from Umar Abdullah Johnson and Dr. Kambom, just to name a few. You can download this at www.gagmusicroom.bandcamp.com and at stlouismixtapes.com. That's STLmixtapes.com. Replace white supremacy with justice now.
This mixtape is only for victims of racism and white supremacy.
Context of white supremacy. Just letting folks know I am aware. The folks saying that they had audio issues for the program. And just, I think 818 had said before, try to do as much as you can, be in the same spot with a clear connection. I've been in the same spot for the program, I think, for at least the last 7 programs, same spot. And yeah, that's why I said the finger is always pointed first and foremost at white people. I had several people said that they were attempting to listen and the TalkShoe site crashed their computer or made it freeze. I think that's a regular occurrence for people. I have difficulties accessing the site as well. Yeah, that is top priority, getting off of TalkShoe as soon as possible. This site is horrific. Nothing good to say about TalkShoe. Also, yeah, we will be back. It will not be on Wednesday because I'm not feeling well, and I feel like my voice has gotten progressively worse over the last couple days, and I'm not interested in laboring through another program where I'm trying to read and ask questions and I sound awful. So I'm going to reschedule the Wednesday program to make it a little later in the week. So hopefully I will be better. I'll sound better, so it won't be such a tussle for me to get through the programs. So the Wednesday program, it'll be a little bit later in the week, but should be constructive information. The professor in Barcelona, Spain, he has a lot of very constructive reports on white supremacy. Now, this is a white person. I remember I said yesterday, strategy I use is just I'm looking for constructive material that I can use. White person in Barcelona, Spain. He teaches, he writes about racism. Very interesting material. And he actually has a book. It's called Communicating Racism, where he's writing and talking about how white people use words and in their regular conversations exchange racist ideas, influence other white people to practice racism or tweak, refine the way that they practice white supremacy racism. Very interesting material. It was suggested from a investor, longtime listener, and I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about having white people back on the program. Period. I always enjoy having. They're the problem. I always enjoy having them on the program. Those are the folks. Everything should be directed at them with regards to blame, anger, all of that. White people. So yeah, just be on the lookout. I will reschedule. And Dr. Kamal Kamban, he should be making his return visit very soon. I will leave it at that, but his return visit should be coming up very soon. Just check the upcoming broadcasts for a date and time. With that said, as I'm not feeling well and I've been looking at my blanket and my pillow. I'm ready to go and get a nap. I hope the program is constructive. I will get the upload the higher quality audio uploaded as soon as possible, and I'll make sure I get that out again. I know folks have said before that the audio quality is not good. Make sure that you get the high quality upload. As I said, it normally takes me about 90 minutes to get that uploaded. So if you don't get that one, the audio quality probably will be poor because the default recording at TalkShoe generally is not very good. So if you just want to listen, if you're impatient and you just want to listen, feel free. It's there. But if you want the higher quality, particularly if you're going to download the program, wait about 90 minutes to an hour. And you'll know it's the higher quality because it'll be edited. It won't be a lot of dead space at the beginning. It'll start right with however the program began. If it's the Black Talk Radio promo or whatever the audio was for that program, it'll begin immediately. There won't be a lot of dead air space at the beginning of the MP3 file. So I'll get this uploaded as soon as I possibly can. And we will be back later in the week. I'm going to give myself some time to take care of myself and Justice as well. She's not feeling particularly well either. Season change and white people's viruses. Dr. Mutegi's website again, sankoreinstitute.org. The website again, sankoreinstitute.org. Very pleased to have him back on the program. Lots of great information. Black person with a patent on a time machine. Man.
I was going to say it's also raining. I believe I heard thunder. The trees are swaying back and forth. Not good weather over here.
Pacific Northwest. I guess, unless you have anything else, I'm looking forward to nap time.
No. I don't think I have anything else. Well, actually, I do. Just hope the lights do not go out.
Amen. But even I can deal with that right now because I plan to be asleep, so it won't make any difference to me. With that, I'm going to get rest, be constructive, and take excellent care of yourself. Don't underestimate your health. Very important to take as best care of yourself as you possibly can under terrible conditions. Context of White Supremacy signing out. We will be back a little later in the week. Replace White Supremacy with Justice immediately.